Hello friends, tonight we're going to take a look at the Geissele SSA-E trigger. You've definitely heard about it, you've probably shot one, and now you're considering buying one for yourself. Normally in a review, I tell you about the product and we compare it to similar products, and then I tell you whether or not I like it. But that doesn't work so well with triggers. There are so many awesome trigger manufacturers these days. Too many to even attempt to list here. CMC, Geissele, Velocity, Timney, they all make awesome triggers. So really, when you're shopping for a trigger, it's just about finding which one feels best to you. So I will do everything that I can to describe the subjective process of pulling a Geissele trigger, and I'll tell you what I like about it. And maybe a Geissele's right for you, maybe a CMC would work better for you, or a Velocity. The important thing to know about triggers is that no YouTube review is going to really come close to replacing the experience of trying a trigger for yourself. You really just need to go out and try as many of them as you can, whether that's in one of those jigs that they have in gun stores, or even better, just firing around with the trigger out of a friend's gun. But all the same, I will do my best to describe what this trigger feels like to me. Let's take a closer look at the differences between a two-stage and a single-stage trigger. If you're new to shooting, you might be asking, why should I be looking at a two-stage trigger versus a single-stage trigger? And really the answer is that you should be looking at a high-quality trigger. That matters a bit more than how many stages it has. For instance, the traditional wisdom says that the two-stage trigger is going to be better for long range and precision shooting, as you can take up that slack in preparation and then apply the final pressure the precise moment you mean to. But my Tikka here has a single-stage trigger, and this is my long-range precision rifle. I don't think anyone would say that this lovely 2-pound single-stage trigger isn't going to be great for precision shooting. But at the same time, now, there are some really bad single-stage triggers out there that absolutely would impede you from making long-distance shots. This mil-spec AR-15 trigger is also a single-stage trigger like the Tikka, but it's so heavy and gritty, I personally have a very hard time shooting it well at longer ranges. Let's talk about the features of the SSA-E. The SSA-E, or Super Semi-Automatic Enhanced Trigger, is a light two-stage trigger. So if you're new to AR-15s or new to shooting in general, you're probably asking, what the hell is a two-stage trigger? That just means that before the gun fires, before the trigger break, there is this kind of a springy slack prior to the wall. And the wall is the point at which you must apply more pressure to fire the round. With the SSA-E, the first stage is 2.3 pounds. The second stage is 1.2. And those numbers add up to 3.5 when I count either with my little fingers, or if I have enough space on my desk and want to be very sure, I can put my wooden toy blocks up here that have numbers painted on them. Those are very helpful. The SSA-E is a lightened version of the SSA, which to me feels only slightly heavier. I think the SSA is like 4.5 pounds instead of 3.5. And I think the break is a little bit less crisp. That's the way it feels to me anyway. And that's not really a bad thing. It's just different. We're back to the subjectivity of triggers once more. In fact, I had kind of a hard time choosing between the SSA and the SSA-E. Geissele advertises that the SSA breaks like a carrot and the SSA-E breaks like a candy cane. Now that I'm thinking about it, that's super weird. Does Geissele have a guy in the back that just like breaks different vegetables and says, this trigger does not feel so much like an aubergine, it's really more of a squash? I don't know, that's super weird, but they're kind of right about the way it feels. The SSA, the break has a little bit more give to it, a little bit more flex, whereas the SSA-E, the break is a tiny bit of flex followed by a very crisp snap. Geissele advertises that the SSA series is combat tested, and they say pretty widely used by various folks in the armed forces. But I don't know if that's true. I do know that a ton of civilians use them. Lots of folks that I know have these triggers. These may be the most popular aftermarket triggers in my area, at least. I've heard that the SSA is more widely used in the armed forces than the SSA-E because the SSA is a little heavier and therefore less prone to unwanted discharges under duress, perhaps. Although between you and me, I don't think anybody wants to have any unwanted discharges. So I have no idea if any of this is factual information. This could just be kind of, gun store hearsay, but apparently these are very popular in the armed forces, and they certainly are popular among civilians. Geissele also advertises that the SSA triggers use full power hammer springs to ensure reliability. I guess that sort of implies that their competitors use lower powered hammer springs, I guess. I haven't seen that any of the high quality triggers have ignition problems, really, or reliability problems of any kind. But at the same time, Geissele has a reputation for testing things thoroughly. So if they say that that gives one an advantage, I would rather just have the advantage, I suppose. I would like to take my Geissele out of the lower to show you the wear, but I'm not going to do that. It's really, really filthy in there, and it'll get stuff all over my desk, and I'm really lazy. So instead, I'm going to show you some pictures and tell you about it instead. The Geissele triggers don't come in a self-contained housing like a Timney or similar trigger, and that makes the Geissele's a little bit easier to look after if you're familiar with the stock AR-15 parts. As you can see, the Geissele looks a bit more like a mil-spec trigger than the self-contained Timney. Mine is wearing very well. After 7,000 rounds fired through several different AR-15s in different lowers, it's still in really awesome shape. And Geissele's machine work is insanely good. I've been very impressed. How does the SSA-E feel? Well, first, the take-up is very smooth but firm. The firmness sort of ensures that the take-up doesn't feel spongy or sludgy. It's really reassuring. You very much feel that wall, and it's actually audible. Have a listen. And this is strange, but it feels as though the wall almost retains the trigger, like less force is required to keep the trigger against the wall once you're there. And the wall feels so solid and so well-defined that you can actually bounce the trigger against it. You can't really do that with a trigger that has a ton of creep. And then you apply more pressure to the wall from there, and there's a tiny bend followed by an impossibly crisp and satisfying snap. Let's see that again. Yeah, it's really nice. Once more, shall we? There's our wall. Oh yeah. Geissele says that this trigger breaks like a candy cane, and they mean it, I guess. There's a tiny bit of flex, then just a crisp, fresh candy cane-like snap. I'm saying that like we all know what it's like to break a candy cane in half. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm the weirdo here, but I haven't gone around just snapping various foodstuffs in half and saying, ah, yes, that's what that feels like. So, I assume when I picture snapping a candy cane in half, I guess that's what it's like. Yeah. So the reset is somewhat long for a high-end trigger. Let's look at that. And it extends past the break. You see that? But the reset is very loud and very tactile. You very much feel it even with heavy gloves on. Yeah. So how do I feel about the SSA-E? As subjective as triggers are, this is simultaneously the most important part of the video and the most pointless, although really most of my videos are kind of pointless. So I find the very firm take-up to be extremely useful. When I'm focusing on quickly lining up a shot, I can rely on the feel and sound of the wall at the end of the really crisp take-up to let me know exactly where I am. And then the break is so crisp that I'm not losing any precision to creep. And that break, it is incredibly satisfying. You just have to feel it to understand it. The way it has just a little bit of give. The snap is so pleasing to the senses, it almost makes me hungry. I don't know if that's a testament to the quality of the trigger or if it means that I'm getting pica or what. It's so satisfying. It makes me want to have lunch. I would bite the trigger if that weren't super weird and I didn't think that I would get lead poisoning. It's just that satisfying. Yeah. In fact, let's look at it one more time. Let's talk about the reset a little bit. So the reset is long, but it serves a purpose, at least for me. It ensures that when I'm firing very quickly, I don't squeeze off an extra shot at the end when I'm riding the reset. That's really easy to do with light single stage triggers that have a super short reset. It almost works like a bump fire. Your finger goes forward, and you don't release very much, so the force of the recoil presses your finger back into the trigger almost. It's pretty common, at least for folks around here, and it doesn't make me dislike single stage triggers by any means. I like them. I just feel very secure with this trigger. I will say though, single stage triggers over maybe, let's say 3 pounds don't tend to have that problem that I just described as much. That's for really light ones largely. Also, as we speed up our shots, trigger control starts to get sloppy. And since the long reset is kind of following your finger out, you aren't yanking your trigger back down onto a trigger that's a lot further away from your finger than you expect it to be, which happens with a super short reset. And that would cause you to pull the shot. Let's see what I mean. So when I pulled my finger way out, well past where a single stage would reset, as would happen under duress, the long reset is actually following my finger out and moving back with it, which makes sure that I don't yank the shot. I pull my finger away quickly, the reset springs out to meet it, and my shot is right where it should be, even though I performed a motion that would normally result in a yanked trigger if I had a nice, crisp single stage. This is my favorite trigger around. I perform best with it. There are lots of other triggers out there, but for me, I just get the best results with this trigger. No contest, really. So, should you buy the SSA-E? Yes, if your tastes are similar to mine, that is. But if you just bought your first AR-15 from PSA or Ruger, or you picked up a Smith & Wesson M&P Sport or something similar, you might not want this to be your first trigger. You will need experience to use this trigger safely. 3.5 pounds is very light. It's lighter than you may think it is, especially with that second stage being 1.2 pounds. So practice with the stock mil-spec trigger for a while, master that, then try something in the 5-pound range like the SSA. I've been shooting AR-15s for 15 years, which really is not that long, but I know the platform, I know rifle triggers in general well enough to feel safe with the SSA-E. Geissele themselves don't recommend this trigger for home defense because it is so light. There's a reason that I still have a rifle with a mil-spec trigger in it. When we're under duress, our fine motor skills are one of the first things to go, so we have to factor that in when we select a trigger to use under duress. But hey, with all that in mind, if you're looking for a trigger so satisfying that you will want to lay in bed dry firing before sleepy time each night, the SSA-E is the one. If you ask me anyway. Thank you so much for watching. Try every trigger you can, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Good night. Oh, that's really hard to do on camera. Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. Thanks for sticking with me through the whole video. We learned a lot, we cried a lot, we hugged a lot, and we made some new friends. It meant a lot to me too. If you learned something or enjoyed yourself, or simply thought that I'm a total jackass and would like to see more of that sort of behavior, please hit that subscribe button. It helps me out a great deal. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you next time. Good night.